Hello and welcome to another episode of LowEndBox TV. In this episode, we're going to show you how to set up your own authoritative name server using NSD. Now, if you've been a bit intimidated by the complexities of bind, or maybe you've just wanted a simple way to set up and run your own DNS, I think you'll enjoy this tutorial because NSD is very easy to use and easy to set up. And we're going to take you through configuring it, and we're going to show you some examples of it in action. This is actually, I think, the third time I've done this tutorial in my life. I did one years ago on freevps.us, if you remember that forum. It's defunct now, sadly. And then I wrote it up on LowEndBox using a little bit different method than we'll use today. Today we're going to go all the way. We're going to have two name servers, and we're going to use zone transfers to keep them in sync, etc. Now, NSD is an authoritative name server, which is usually what people want when they say, hey, I want to run my own DNS. It's not a caching name server. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of bind, but it's much simpler to configure and pretty easy to set up. And you don't need a big system to run it. NSD is very memory friendly. So I run NSD on 128 meg VPSs. If you've got a VPS that's doing a web server or a couple utility VPSs running around, that's perfect for NSD. Really, just about anything you've got here in the 21st century will run NSD just fine. So what I've got is a couple VPSs from Linode. These are, let's see here, these are Debian 10.9. And I think these are 1 gig VPSs, so they should have more than enough horsepower to run this. And to get started, I'm just going to type apt-get install NSD. Boom. We'll go ahead and we'll do that on both sides. This is node 2. We'll just do an apt-get install NSD over there. And once it's done, we will now have an etc NSD directory here. Let's go take a look at that. Now, there's a NSD comp file. You can get fancy if you want and break up your configuration and put some stuff into nsd.confd. I'll leave that as homework for you if that's what you want to do, but I'm just going to move nsd.conf to nsd.conf dist and directly just create a new NSD comp file. And I will amaze you with the speed of my typing here, but of course in actuality I'm just pasting in from my notes. But let's walk through this config file. It's pretty simple actually. It starts with, there's really three clauses here. I've got a server clause, a key clause, and a zone clause. And you might actually have multiple zone clauses. In this example we're just using one zone. So the first section is server, and we're going to say IP address, and that's going to be the IP address to bind to. Obviously, normally this would be the IP address of your system. So if I do IP address here, you can see that is the IP address of my system. Of course, you can use IPv6 if you want. If you've got more than one IP address on this system, you could bind to all of them. Hide version is a option that means that when a client connects, NSD will not tell it what its version is, and that's just kind of a security improvement. I don't want somebody to ask my name server, hey, what version of that software are you running? I just heard about this 0 day, and I want to see if you're vulnerable, right? So I just leave hide version on. Database and log file are just the traditional places for that. If you keep your log files in varlog nsd.log, they'll be rotated as part of Debian's log rotate, so I would just recommend leaving that stuff where it is. Server count is how many NSD servers to start up. It's not how many servers are in your DNS cluster. It's how many processes or how many workers, what's a good word, NSD should start. So I imagine this is going to be pretty low volume, but if you had a lot of DNS querying going on, you might want to increase that number. And then verbosity, I set that to 2, and I'm only doing that for purposes of this tutorial. Normally I don't put that, I would just comment that out. I would turn it on just in case I'm having some kind of a problem because it puts more information in the logs. And particularly in this case, we're going to show you how it works with notifies, and you can see that. Now, when I say zone transfers, here's what I mean. I've got two servers here, and they're ns1.lowend.party and ns2.lowend.party, and both of those servers are serving the same DNS information. To keep them in sync, we use what's called zone transfers, and what that means is that when I make changes on server 1 here, I can type, or NS1 rather, I can use a command that will go out and notify all of my DNS secondaries and say, hey, there's some new information on this zone. I can say for all the zones or only for a specific zone if I wanted. Contact me and get the details. And that's what a zone transfer is. Now in this case, I want to protect that with a key so that someone can't just come along and say, hey, hey DNS server, give me the zone information for this. In order to actually query the server and get the zone information, you're going to need to know my secret key. Now I've given the key a name of secret. I've chosen the algorithm here, and if you were to man nsd.conf and just search for algorithm, you can, here's a list of all the algorithms that are available. The default is SHA-256, so I just went HMAC SHA-256. And then the secret is actually a base 64 encoded, think of a good passphrase, whatever you want to use, and then base 64 encoded. Let me show you how to do that. So in this case, I used Klaatu Barada Nikto. If you've ever seen the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, that will make sense to you. And in fact, I do an echo-n, which means don't put a new line at the end of it. My passphrase, of course, you should probably pick something better than this one, but this is just for a tutorial. And pipe that into OpenSSL base 64. And that returns this string, and then I just pasted that into here for the secret. Now, that's really it for the key. So, of course, when I set up the secondary name server, I'll need to have that information also. Now, I'm only going to have one zone here, and it's going to be the zone LowEnd party. So there's a couple things I need to configure under the zone clause. And, if I had more zones, I would just go here and add in, I could have a zone example.com, and it would be in this, example.com, and then I could have, whatever else. I could do as many as I wanted here. You can actually also split things up, put multiple zone files, etc., or break your configuration up, but it's easiest just to put it all in one here for these smaller types of configs. So under the zone clause, I've got my name. The name of the domain is lowend.party. The zone file, which is where all the DNS records live, and I'll be showing you that here in a second. Notify. Now this is where I'm going to send my notifications to. So my other ns2.lowend.party, this address here, if I go over to ns2 and I do an IP address, I can see that's where my information is. So that's where I'm going to send notifications to, and you can see here at the end I put secret. That means they have to have this key. If I had called this key foo, I would put notify that IP address and then foo, right? So, and then provide a transfer for that IP address and that key. Now, when I've got my configuration is going to look a little different on the slave. This one I'm just saying, here's who I notify and here's who I provide transfer to. On the slave, we'll have a little bit different information here because obviously the IP address will be different, but it'll be saying where do I get my information from, where do I request my notification or my transfer from. But that's essentially all there is to setting up NSD. Now there's one final thing that I will add here. If you're running a firewall, I'm not on these systems, but if you're running a firewall, you want to open up port 53 UDP to the world, because all of anyone on the internet who's looking for information is going to be doing an Nslookup or a query in the lowend.party domain. They will come in on port 53 UDP. You also, however, want to open up port 53 TCP to other to your slave DNS servers, because they will do zone transfers over TCP on port 53. So you can again, it's port 53 UDP to the world, port 53 TCP to any other slave DNS servers. All right, so that is set up for NS1. And at this point, I'm just going to try system control. Actually, is it running? I don't think it is. I don't think it starts automatically. No, it is. All right, well, let's do a system control restart NSD. And while we're at it, let's just make sure that it's enabled so it comes up at boot time. Cool. Now, over on my secondary, I am going to do something very similar here. I'm once again going to dazzle you with the speed of my typing. So let's go into Etsy NSD and move nsd.conf to nsd.conf.dist and edit the nsd conf file, and boom, there it is. All right, so much of this will look the same. Obviously, I'm using NS2's IP address. That's the IP address I'm going to bind to. Hide version, database log file, these are all things that we talked about. These are exactly the same. We'll make the verbosity 2. Same secret, same key. All this is the same. Obviously, I've been careful here to make sure that my secret here is the same as on this system. These have to match, otherwise it's not going to work. Now for the zone here, again, I'm serving the low-end party zone. Put the zone file in the same place. The last two, however, there's a couple changes. Allow notify, I'm going to allow notifications from NS1, 173.255.211.188, and that is the IP address for NS1. Okay, and I will be using the secret key, which is specified up here. And then request transfers, you put AXFR. You could also put, there's a UDP method, but I just use AXFR. And then you put in the IP address of the server, that the primary server, and then at 53, in other words, at port 53 secret. So, you know, it's kind of a recipe here. You sort of, this is the syntax, and you just need to put it in the syntax. But logically, if you just read this, it makes sense. I'm going to allow notifications from NS1 using the secret shared key, shared secret, and then I'm going to request, once it notifies me, hey, there's information to get, I'm going to request my transfers from NS1 at port 53 using the secret. And of course, over on NS1, we're going in the other direction. I'm going to say, hey, when I have a change, I'm going to notify NS2, and I'm going to provide transfer for NS2. So NS1, which is the primary DNS server, is notifying and providing transfers. NS2 is allowing notifications and requesting transfers. And that's all there is to setting up node 2. So let's system control restart NSD, and we make sure it's enabled here as well. Cool. Now we've got NSD up and running, and it's configured, and it knows about its kind of relationship with the other DNS server in my kind of cluster here, but I don't have any records yet. So if you recall, if I look at nsd.conf, I said we're going to keep our zones. Where is it? Here we go. In Etsy NSD zones low-end party. Now that zones directory is just something I use. You could put it here in the Etsy NSD directory if you want. I just like to put my zones into a separate directory. So I made a directory called zones, and I probably want to make one over here too. And I'm going to edit zones lowend.party, and I'm going to paste in this intimidating file. Look at all this bizarre syntax. Let's walk through this. It's actually pretty simple, and I think it'll make make sense to you. We're not going to go through all of it because if you really want to read up on this stuff, you can. But I'm just going to show you the bare basics of how to update your DNS. So you have this $origin, that's the first line. In fact, let me turn on numbering here. So line 1, origin. Line 2, time to live. Now that is, if someone queries a record, how long should it cache that information before it tries to query again? Now, you can set this absurdly low if you want. Some people will set it like 300, and that's in seconds, so 300 would be 5 minutes. The problem is, there's a lot of upstream DNS servers that don't want to constantly be doing the network traffic of querying every server just because someone wants their DNS to update instantly. So they'll say, no matter what you set, I'm going to set a minimum value of 3600. That's very common. So I normally set mine at 3600. You can set it higher if you wish, but I think if you set it below 3600, you may find that not everyone is going to honor that. Line 4, we say at in SOA. That means the start of authority for this domain. For ns1.lowend.party, that's the first name server. And then admin.lowend.party is the contact in dot notation. So they should read that as admin@lowend.party. Now, I want to make one comment here. It's really important. You'll see a dot here at the end of, go back up to line 1, origin lowend.party dot. Now, that dot is actually very significant. What that means is stop processing the name when you get to that dot. If I didn't have a dot on there, what it would do is it would say, let's append the domain name. So for example, if I was creating a record and I created a record for just www, it would append www.lowend.party. If I put www dot, it would say, all right, it's just www, right? Or here, I've got admin.lowend.party dot. If I didn't put that dot there, what this actually would read as is like that, which obviously we don't want. So just keep that in mind, that normally you want to end a lot of things with that dot, so that means, hey, that's the end of my, that's the end of the name that I'm trying to give here. Now, the next section is the serial number, and that's an important part because when we update this file, we want to change the serial number. It's a classic mistake, classic sysadmin mistake. Anybody who's ever administered DNS knows they've done this. To go in, make some changes in the records, and then forget to update the serial number. And if you don't update the serial number, what happens is upstream DNS or one of your slave servers will query and say, all right, I want to look something up, or I've got a cache, I want to update it for lowend.party. What's the serial number for the last update? And if you don't update this, they'll come back and say, well, it's serial number 1, and they'll say, oh, I've already got serial number 1. Great, don't need to update anything. So if you update it to 2, on the other hand, they'll come back. If they've got 1, they'll say, oh, okay, so there's a newer version. Now, there's a number of different ways of doing this. You could just make these, serial number 1, and the next time change it to serial number 2, and then change it to serial number 3, etc. A real common trick is to use this date format. If you look at this, this is year, month, day, and then a 01 at the end, and the next time I'd go in and change it to 2, and change it to 3, etc. That just takes advantage of the fact that if we write the date in year first, 4 digits, month, making sure that it is 2 digits, and day, making sure that it's 2 digits, and then put a 01, we have an ascending, an always ascending number. But you don't have to do that. You can do these any way you want. Once you've done your first one, though, the next number has to be bigger than, let's see, what would this be? 200 or 2 billion and 21 million, etc., etc. So pick a system and stick with it, but I would recommend just using the simple date format. All right, I'm not going to discuss the rest of this. This is for kind of zone transfer information, which we're not going to worry about yet because we're just going to manually send out notifications. Let's go down here to the records. We define the 2 name servers in name server in NS, ns1.lowend.party and ns2.lowend.party. With a period at the end. I could, I think, also write these as in ns1, right? And then, because I didn't put a period at the end, it would append .lowend.party. And let's see here. I've defined then, this is, now we're into kind of the meat. This is what you're probably actually interested in as far as setting up your DNS records. ns1 in a record. The A record is the primary record that you're interested in. So this says when I query ns1.lowend.party, and note I put ns1 here, I didn't put ns1.lowend.party. If I had done that, it would be the same thing. If I query ns1.lowend.party, I should get back 173, 255, 211, 188. Now I've created a couple other bogus records here. Big VPS, that's not a real address. That's just one I made up, and it's really just for purposes of this example. But if I were to query bigvps.lowend.party, I should get back this 1.23.45.100. And then I've created this CNAME, www. And a CNAME is a DNS alias. So if I query www.lowend.party, I should get back a message saying, hey, that's actually a CNAME or an alias for bigvps.lowend.party. And by the way, the address for bigvps.lowend.party is 1.23.45.100. Now, there's all kinds of other DNS records out there. There's MX records, which control mail. There's text records, which are sometimes used for authenticating different things. There's IPv6 records, which are, instead of in A, it's in and 4A's, quad A. And you can Google that and read that stuff on your own. It's pretty easy to set those up, and they're all in the same format here. A couple tweaks for things like MX records, etc., but very easy once you've got the basic idea down. Okay, so this is our zone file for LowEnd.party. Now I'm not going to change the serial number here because this is the first time I've done this, so we'll just go ahead and save this. Now, there's a couple different ways I can update NSD and say, hey, there's some new information in your zone files. By default, NSD is not going to, just because you change the file, it's not going to go and immediately update that information in its brain. It doesn't know. Actually, its brain, by the way, is in varlib NSD NSDDB, right? It's not going to immediately notice that you changed a file. So there's a couple different ways to do it. One is to use the NSD control, and this has a whole bunch of different commands you can use, but one is that we're interested in at the moment is to reload. And that is the most elegant way to do it because NSD keeps running, it keeps answering queries, it doesn't take NSD down, it just reloads the file. And we could say reload one zone or reload all zones. Now we only have one zone in this case, so we'll just say NSD reload, NSD control reload. Okay, and that's all there is to it. And I believe, let's see, do I have a varlog NSD? No, oh, I'm sorry, it's actually going to be in varlog syslog. Yep, there we go. Okay. Okay, so if I do a Nslookup, let's talk about this. Normally, people are accustomed to doing something like this. Nslookup, you know, yahoo.com. Is Yahoo still around? Yeah, they are. All right, and that returns, you know, the information that I've asked it. But you can also do something like this: Nslookup, and then I want to specify a server. Server. And I'm going to talk to my local server here, and now I can go ahead and issue a query like bigvps.lowend.party. And it returns that record that I set up there. Or if I say, where is www.lowend.party? It comes back and it says, hey, the canonical name, or the CNAME, is bigvps.lowend.party, and this is the address here. So things are working correctly there for NSD. Now let's go ahead and get our zone transfers set up. Okay, so we've got NSD up and running on node 1, and to get that information over to node 2 or NS2, all I need to do is do a zone transfer, and the way I do that is through this NSD control command. NSD control notify. You remember when we set up NSD conf, we said notify, you know, for the zone, LowEnd party, notify this other DNS server and provide a transfer. So I went ahead and did a NSD control notify, got back this OK. Then if I go over to NS2 and I look at its log, I'm here in varlog syslog, I see here received update. I can see some information here that I received an update. Let's see here. And here I go. I've updated my LowEnd.party serial number, because it was serial number 0. That's because it had no information on LowEndParty. It knew it existed because I had configured that zone, but it had no information. It updated it from serial number 0 to this 2021-04-10-01 and notify for LowEndParty. All right, so now let's see here. I am on NS2, so let's do a Nslookup, and we're going to set our server this time to NS2, and now let's look up www.lowend.party. And I'm getting the same information because it's done the zone transfer, right? It's saying the canonical name is bigvps.lowend.party, and that's the address there. Now I do have a zones, but if you notice, it's empty. There's nothing in it, but that information is in the NSD DB. Okay, so when you do a zone transfer, it doesn't actually copy over the text file, it just copies over the information. So think of a slave DNS server not as an exact replica, right? I wouldn't want to lose my primary DNS server because, or at least I want to make sure I back it up, because that contains all the human editable files, right? I want to make sure that I can go in and edit those, whereas the slaves simply are there for redundancy and performance and availability and that kind of stuff, right? So make sure that you're keeping in mind, it's not, don't go blow away your primary and say, well, I've got all that information on the secondary. You do, but you don't have it in a human editable format. So now let's go back to node 1 here, and I'm going to go into my zones file and edit LowEndParty, and I'm going to add, let's say, server 1 in a 5, 6, 7, 8, and I've got to remember to update my serial number. So if it was tomorrow, I'd probably change this to 411, but it's 410 today. Serial number 2 looks good. Now I will do an NSD control reload. Now if I copy that, if I do an Nslookup, say server this, and I do a query for server1.lowend.party, I get back the answer. However, if I go over to NS2 and I say I fire up Nslookup, say talk to server 2, and I do a server1.lowend.party lookup, it worked. I actually was not expecting it to work. It's done a possibly, let me see here, I'm wondering if the reload is, let's see here, reload. I was expecting to have to do an NSD notify, something like NSD, but let's go look at the log file here. This is kind of interesting. That's what happens when you work live here. Let's go look here in syslog and see what happened. Okay, this was the previous one, and then it did actually get in. Let's do this. Let's tail this guy. Varlog, syslog. And I'm going to go over here and say LowEnd.party. And we're going to add server 2 in a, and we'll just make this 8.9.10.11. And NSD control reload. Oh, you know what? I told you it's a classic mistake. Let's go up here and update my serial number. That's what we need. So there's no update over there. All right. Now let's do that reload. Boom. Do we get, look at that. I guess part of the notification when you do the reload is it actually sends out that notification to all of the slave as well. Well, that's pretty cool. So now if I do an Nslookup here, Nslookup on server 2, NS2, and I say give me server2.lowend.party. Yep, it works. Well, I learned something in this tutorial as well. You can do, there is an NSD control notify, and that actually manually sends out a notification. But apparently just doing a reload also sends out a notification, so that's kind of cool. So to manage your nodes, what you need to do is just go in and edit the process if you want to edit, modify your DNS records is you go into that zone file, go down here and change whatever information you want, add, delete, change, whatever, and then make sure you update that serial number. Otherwise, things won't get updated. And then once you're done, just NSD control, reload, and that will update both the primary node and all of the secondaries. All right, there's one final piece that we need to do, and that is to actually go to our registrar and set up our domain to redefine the authoritative name servers. Everything, if you notice, we've done right now is with Nslookup saying, hey, go talk to this DNS server or go talk to that DNS server. But what we want is that I can just type Nslookup, or if I'm working in my browser or whatever client I'm using, it's just I don't have to specify which DNS server to talk to. It just is universal that the information stored on these DNS servers is the authoritative information for LowEnd.party. So there's a couple things I need to do. First, I'm going to go into my panel here, and I want to go to this glue records. Now, your panel might look different. The terminology, though, should be same if you're using a different registrar. And I've defined two glue records here, ns1.lowend.party, and I've put in the IP address, ns2.lowend.party, and I've put in the IP address. Think of these as kind of I guess you could say the bootstrap records or the Genesis records, right? These are the records that say you got to start somewhere, right? So when you come and say, hey, registrar, that is the start of all information for this domain, where do I go to get information on DNS records in this domain? It'll say, well, you can either go to NS1 or NS2, and here are the IP addresses. And then you also need to go into the authoritative name servers here and just define those, set those two as the authoritative name servers. Now, I want you to notice in this particular panel it says, please note, we allow this change to take up to 48 hours. In my experience, it's a lot faster, but it can take a while for information to propagate all the way across the internet. Something else that I'll point out is that I'm using Porkbun here. They update their name servers very quickly, like within seconds of committing the information. Other registrars, NameSilo, for example, they say, hey, we only update once every 15 minutes. So you're not going to get any action for 15 minutes. So just be aware of, first of all, when does the changes that you make in your panel actually become live on the registrar's name servers, and then of course there could be a delay in propagating that to the rest of the internet, because you as a end user or end users around the world are going to use whatever DNS service that they think is best for them, right? Maybe they're using Google's DNS at 8.8.8.8, or maybe they're using DNS provided by their ISP or what have you. For the information to get across and for that that ISP to say, what the best case is if that DNS server, that ISP or Google or whoever, has never queried that domain before, or they've expired from their cache all information on that domain. That's great, because then it's going to go to the registrar, get the information, and go look at either NS1 or NS2. But particularly if you've queried it something recently, you got to wait for that cache to expire typically. All right, one final thing I want to do. I'm here logged into my iMac at home, and I just want to do some queries to see if DNS is in fact working. So I've got my registrar set up, I've got DNS up and running, and I just want to do a couple queries here to make sure that things are working as I expect. And I am using Google's public DNS here at 8.8.8.8. So let's just query here, Nslookup www.lowend.party. Hey, perfect. Now, I'm not querying my name server directly. I'm querying Google's DNS, but it's coming back correctly. It's saying www.lowend.party. The canonical name is bigvps.lowend.party, and here's that address. And I can also do let's do server 2. That's the last one that we entered. Perfect, there it is. So DNS appears to be working just fine. So that's kind of a quick walkthrough of how to set up NSD, and You can find a lot more information. Actually, the NSD man pages are very good. They've got a lot of information, or just Google NSD, and I'm sure you'll find lots of help. Or you can come to LowEndTalk and ask questions there. So on that note, I would like to invite you to come to either LowEndBox or LowEndTalk. We have a lot of great technical content like what you've seen here today. We have the best deals, bar none, in the hosting industry. Interesting commentary and opinions from leaders in the industry, and very spirited discussion. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more of this content, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And until next time, happy hosting.